we're so happy that all of you decided to join us today for our session. My name is Barbara Halsey, and I'm the Operations Director for Delegata Corporation, and it is a pleasure to be with all of you today. So, like the pit crew in our opening clip, we know that project teams are under enormous pressure to deliver project outcomes that are exceptional. The pressures on time, the pressures on budget are present in every delivery that's done. As the discipline of project management has matured, we've come to understand that there are mission-critical elements that must be in place and functioning well for the success of a project to become a reality. In our short time together this afternoon, you're going to have the opportunity to hear from 4 state leaders who will share with you their practical experience in running projects and the insights on what they've done to win in 4 key project areas, specifically sponsorship, collaboration, communication, accountability, and governance. Before we start, I'd like you to meet our drivers for the session.
Russ the Red Baron Nichols won sponsorship from the California Department of Corrections and has been setting the pace as IT Director and Agency CIO since January 2015. The Red Baron positions his teams for success by getting them to push the envelope on what IT can do to meet business needs. Notably, the Red Baron directed the successful implementation of the largest offender management solution in the United States. SOMS supports over 53,000 users at more than 50 institutions and administrative sites across California. Gretchen Trailblazer Williams has been on the CIO circuit for over 16 years. For the past 7, she has taken the driver's seat as Deputy AIO, sponsored by the California Health and Human Services Agency. With a pit crew made up of department CIOs, she guides and oversees the management of IT assets, services, and IT project portfolios valued at $2.5 billion. Trailblazer's recent wins include the programs for enterprise architecture, portfolio management, IT governance, and strategic planning. She's been instrumental in moving the agency from a Cadillac IT model to a Ferrari. George the Iceman Akiyama was drawn into the fast-paced IT race as a college student. Bitten by the lure of the information highway, he secured a top sponsorship with the state of California in 1995 and began his climb into the winner's circle. He was previously sponsored by Fiscal and CalPERS. The Iceman served his time in multiple pit positions, from application development manager to CIO. George won his way into the driver's seat in 2015 with an appointment from Governor Jerry Brown. He power slid into Caltrans as Chief Information Officer. Liana Lightning Bailey-Crimmins made her debut on the public sector circuit 28 years ago. From a student assistant to CIO, her better together and get it done attitude provided her with the grit needed to stay the course. Sponsored by CDCR for 10 years, her ability to drive success brought her to the attention of her current sponsor, CalPERS. Lightning signed on as CIO of CalPERS in 2013. She provides executive IT direction and oversight, ensuring that the 1.8 million members and over 3,000 employers served by CalPERS are always in the winner's circle.
So there you have it. Welcome our panel with me, please. In their own right. So for the next 30 minutes, we're going to make 4 pit stops. This doesn't mean that you can get out of the car and get a snack or use the restroom. Our pit stops are a little different than that. We're going to be spending some time exploring how these 4 leaders have achieved success on the projects that they've run. So you'll have a chance to hear some practical tips, some of their lessons learned, and then at the very end, we're going to wrap up our session by giving you the opportunity to ask them some of the burning questions that you may have. So, race fans, get ready. We're going to launch our first pit stop.
We all need a champion. Speed and a great pit crew aren't enough to win a race. Having a sponsor who brings funding, visibility, and ensures obstacles are removed is critical to the success of a race team.
So, George, project sponsors play such a key role in setting and maintaining the direction on a project. We know that their influence, their engagement can make or break project success. They're also usually executives who have a lot on their plates. How have you worked with executive sponsors to help them better understand their role and see it as a priority?
Well, thank you so much, Barbara. You know, first off, I want to thank actually Delegata, since you talked about sponsoring, for kind of sponsoring this session. And actually, we've got a lot of IDLA 24 folks in the house, right? So thanks for helping us to set up this session. You know, sponsorship to me is where it all starts with an effort, right? Let's talk a little bit about different kinds of sponsors. Because sponsors can come in all different shapes and sizes, right? And its most fundamental, guys, I guess you would say a sponsor can bring funding. So out of curiosity, since we're talking races, how many folks watched the Daytona 500 this year? Oh, am I alone? You're kidding me. Really?
I watched it.
All right, come on, come out of the closet. All right. All right, so for you race fans, Denny Hamlin won that race this year, right? And he won it by 4 inches. The guy races 500 miles, right? And he wins the race by 4 inches. It was a remarkable story. You know, who did Denny thank when he got to the end of that race? He thanked FedEx and Toyota, right? So you think, okay, FedEx and Toyota, they're sponsors, and they are. But in that case, really, they provided funding. You know, it's not as if FedEx and Toyota are providing race strategy or pit strategy, right? They're providing funding, and that's kind of your sponsorship in its most basic form, right? Somebody who provides funding. I tell you, my 13-year-old's looking for the same kind of sponsorship for me. All he wants is funding at this point in time. But even in those situations, right, even those most fundamental situations, you know, you still have to have some kind of contract or agreement, right? You got to know, right, what you're going to get from the sponsor, and the sponsor's got to have expectations of you, right? And that's the most fundamental. So you got to know what kind of sponsor you need, because they come in all different shapes and sizes, and you still have to have some kind of contract or agreement with them. Now, there's also kind of broader forms of sponsorship. You know, sometimes you need a sponsor who's going to remove roadblocks. You also need a sponsor, right, who's going to provide the funding, just like Denny Hamlin got, and those sponsors also help position your efforts, you know, politically, right, with either overseers or other executives. And sometimes you need those sponsors to make quick decisions, quick and efficient decisions for you. So I'm reminded of a time in the Franchise Tax Board. We're implementing the 2012 to 2016 strategic plan, right? And it was a pretty innovative plan, and from my perspective, it still is very innovative. New mission, new vision, new goals, right? Performance metrics, something that really isn't done in a lot of organizations, and they've got to roll that out to 5,000 or 6,000 employees. You know, John Brule this morning talked about positive disruption, right? So for me, the new strategic plan was one of those examples of positive disruption. So I didn't need a sponsor that just did funding, right? We needed the kind of sponsors that would help remove roadblocks, right? That would make decisions, right? We need those sponsors that were way more engaged in that kind of effort. So what we did is we talked to all those division chiefs, you know, and the executive officer. We talked to them in the one-on-one levels, right? We talked to them in FDB's governance council. And all that dialogue, right, helps kind of cement what kind of sponsor you need, right? Where you need them, where you're going to get assistance from them. And also, you know, we also worked on our own kind of contracts to hold them accountable as well. In order to get them engaged, we had them actively involved in the org change management plan. You know, were we going to do a high effort, a medium effort, a low effort, right? So we got them active in the rollout of the strategic management plan, because we didn't want that plan just to be shelfware, right? We wanted all of the FDB staff to really live it and breathe it. So we needed that kind of engagement from those sponsors. Now, the contract we had, right, is as we rolled out different goals or missions and visions, right, we held them accountable to some performance metrics. We asked them, as we surveyed their staff, what percentage of your staff are really going to know about the new mission and vision, right? And it kind of started out, some folks said, well, maybe 50%, right? But, you know, these are all executives, you know, and they're also very competitive executives.
Nothing wrong with healthy competition.
But, you know, I love go-karting, so if anybody after the, no. So, they started outbidding themselves, right? So it started at 50%, then it was 70%, then 76%, then 80%, right? And it kept going up and up. But in setting those kind of verbal contracts, right, we gained their support and we were clear about what we expected from them at the end of the day. And we shared those survey results at the end of each milestone. When we surveyed about missions and vision, or when we surveyed about the different goals, we found out how well they were doing, right, in spreading the word to make sure everybody would have to be the new direction. So for me, just kind of summarizing it all, right, you've got to make sure you know the kind of sponsor that you need, right? Is it the kind of sponsor that's just going to provide funding, right? Or is it the kind of sponsor you need to be way more engaged to talk about, kind of the issues that you're facing, to help roll out initiatives, to help the project pivot when you need to. So that's how you get that engagement, right?
Thanks, George. Thanks. Clearly, an effective sponsor who can serve as a chief champion and hold vision, who can translate and do the mediation, the roadblock removal that needs to be done, and encourage your team from day one to close out it's a critical role for them to play. Thanks for sharing that with us. Okay, NASCAR Nets, are you ready? We're going to do another pit stop.
In the pit stop, nothing is static. While rules change, collaboration helps the team stay on course. Individual heroics might win you one race, but it's the ability to adapt and work collaboratively that helps your project team win the World Championship.
So we hear a lot about collaboration. It's held up as a best practice in project delivery, and it's a thing of beauty to behold when it happens. But it can be a challenge to put into practice. Liana, tell us about your experience with effective collaboration and share with us how you believe it changed the outcomes on a project.
Thank you, Barbara. That's a great question. As many of you know, IT projects focus on delivering technology solutions. But a question that I'd like to ask all of you is, how many of you ever yourself or your project team fell into the pitfall of focusing so much on the technology that sometimes the people, the change, the collaboration ends up being a secondary priority? I saw a few hands raised. So a project is a journey. So think about it. We spend on an average projects 3 years, 5 years, in some cases 10 years. And success means fostering relationships, connecting, and really focusing on the people. In my tenure of 28 years of serving at State of California, I've been on almost 100 projects. That's a lot of projects. So at the receiver's office, I run 19 simultaneous projects that are worth a little less than $1 billion. They all ran simultaneously. And then I've also done internal projects such as virtualization, so turning a physical environment into virtual. So there are a lot of projects. But on my watch, I have never had a single failure. And that is not because I'm perfect, and that is not because I'm really lucky. What it means is I've set a goal, and the project set a goal, but I'm flexible on how we get there. When we need to pivot right, we pivot right. When we need to pivot left, we pivot left. So understanding that it's a journey. There is a quote by Henry Ford, that reminds us of collaboration and that we cannot do this alone. He states, quote, "Coming together is the beginning." I have to make sure I keeping together is progress, but working together is success. And working together is what collaboration is all about. I worked at California Youth Authority, which is also known as Department of Juvenile Justice. Not sure if you're aware of this, but when a 13 or 15, 16-year-old commits a crime, they become a ward of the court. And they serve that term in an institution, not ran by wardens, but they are ran by superintendents. And the focus for these youths is to rehabilitate every single one of those individuals that go into youth authority actually are going to end up back on the street. So we want them to be citizens that help support the community, or versus them becoming a lifetime adult criminal. So, not sure if you're aware of this, but they have a right to education just like your kids and my kids. And when we were put on this project for digital high school, we needed to put computers in each of the classrooms. And let me explain to you, a teacher that walks into a classroom that needs to teach a class of 16-year-olds, some of those 16-year-olds may only have a third grade reading level. Some may have fifth, and if you're lucky, maybe they have a high school reading level. So think about that. You cannot teach equally to those students. So what we were able to use the computers for is they actually did self-assessments, and those self-assessments allowed us to figure out where they were, meet them where their educational level was, and then the teacher was able to produce customized curriculum for those individual students. So when that student was able to go from third grade to sixth grade in one semester, that was a win for him. Amazing. Versus if he was being taught at a high school level, he would have checked out and said, this is just too much, I don't need to participate. And how many of you remember field trips when you went to school, right? We went to the science museums, we had a great time. It actually gave us a glimpse into what was possible. So what we were able to do is we used video conferencing systems, because these kids could not actually get out of the institutions. And they were actually able to do virtual field trips. They would interact with the curator of the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. They were also able to, there was a math class that I actually participated in, and there was a teacher that was in scuba gear. And I don't know about if everyone remembers geometry, but it was the length of the pool with the depth of the pool and the width. And he was in scuba gear, and he was interacting underwater with these students. So pretty amazing. So think about it from a collaboration perspective. We had teachers who are very passionate about education and making a difference in those students' lives. We had Apple, who was a vendor, who was the leader of developing enhanced curriculum and delivering that, put that at the students' fingertips. And then you had superintendents. So let me explain. The superintendents were very, very concerned about security. They were afraid that those youths were going to put notes on the computer that were gang-related. They were afraid that those CD-ROMs in the computer was going to be used for tattoo devices, which, they could be. And so when you get individuals to collaborate, you have to understand that we all have diverse perspectives and we don't all agree, but because we were passionate about the why of the project and what it was going to do, we were able to collaborate and bring that project across the finish line. So a few years later, I've been in IT for a very long time. I ran into a gentleman, a Verizon telecommunications engineer, and he goes, Mrs. Bailey-Crimmins, I was in youth authority. And I said, oh, you worked at youth authority? He goes, no, I was in youth authority. And at that time, he was making six figures, and he explained how important that digital high school was to him to provide that glimpse that he needed in order to make a difference. So collaboration is really, it values the differences we all bring to the table, and it ensures that we are engaged. And I always look at it from a 3C perspective. Connect, collaborate, and communicate. Connect with the why of a project. If you have key stakeholders that connect to that why, that superintendent, even though security was his passion, what was very important to him, he needed to connect that this was going to make it better and it was going to reduce recidivism. And when it comes to collaboration, we had to step out of our own roles and do what was right and get that project across the finish line. And then communication. You have to communicate in the voice of the receiver. A lot of times on projects, we're very directive. This is what we believe we want to communicate, and we push it out. But when I'm talking to a teacher, I would communicate very differently than I would communicate to a superintendent, or when I was engaging Apple. You know, it was a way of how do we actually communicate in a way that's going to make a difference. So in closing, what I want to remind you is that we all have different roles and expertise. And back to the pit crew, I'll tell you, we need to be able in that 5 or 10 minutes in that pit, we need to work as a team and understand our roles, because if we don't, we are sending that NASCAR car on the racetrack with 3 wheels instead of 4. And I'll tell you, you won't win a race with 3 wheels. At least maybe George might. I have seen him drive.
Only when
I'd give it a try.
He would give it a try. But if you took one thing away from what I say today, remember, please set a focus, a goal of where your project's going, but be flexible on how you get there, because it is a journey.
Good, thank you. So planning and goal setting together, keeping communication flowing, using the discipline of project management and what that brings to the team, understanding the dynamics of your team and what the goals are for each one of those team members is important, and then supporting the team and your customers by keeping the big picture in front of them all the time. That's fantastic. I love that. You often don't get to hear about or see the end result of a project. So Liana, I appreciate your sharing the gentleman who approached you. It's nice to know that the work you did had significant impact for the individuals that you delivered for. I know that we're moving fast. I hope that you're all keeping up with us, and I bet none of you have any idea what's coming next.
Pit stop!
Stop. Thank you for playing along. I appreciate that very much.
Communication in every project is key. It's likely that all of your pit crew members will be speaking a different language. It's critical that you find a common language so you can bridge that divide, ensuring that your people are saying the right things to the right people through the right channels.
This is such an important aspect of every delivery. Done well, it creates momentum and an environment of project success. Done poorly, it can actually cause a project to fail. When you consider, Gretchen, the projects that you've been involved with, what difference did well-executed communication strategies make versus those that were more ad hoc?
So I think you actually mentioned a couple of key points that I want to make sure that we touch on. So just kind of walk with me for a minute here. We're on a journey, right? This is utopia. We've all been on projects, and the communication style it's open, it's flowing, it's clear, internal, external, everyone's informed. Your sponsors are well positioned to make informed decisions. We are set up for success. Now, walk with me for a minute just to the dark side. The reality of many of our projects. There is inconsistent communication strategy. We are not applying it consistently. We're not clear in the beginning about how these things are going to occur. There is confusion. People are making assumptions, right? That's the worst case scenario that you're getting into, is when things aren't being said, people are making their own realities. There's a lack of trust that comes as a result of that. People are looking around saying, does she really know what she's doing? Is this guy going to be the best person for this job? The reality of these type of projects is it starts to create chaos within your teams. And something as simple and foundational as a strong communication strategy in the beginning doesn't seem like a very significant element, but it's a key success factor. So within that chaos, some of the reality that comes as a result of that is frequent escalation, right? So that just adds to the chaos of the project. So just a quick show of hands. How many in the room are looking for or striving in your projects to get a phone call that goes something like, Gretchen, this is the director. I have some questions about your project. Can you just step down the hall for a minute so we can talk? Who wants to get phone calls like that? And most most of the time, the phone call is coming because someone has taken an off-ramp on your project and has communicated something inaccurate.
In the absence of communication, they're going to make it up, right?
Exactly. Assumptions, confusion, and chaos. So these are realities that I'm sure many of you are facing in your projects today. It's just the reality of human nature. So there's a couple of simple things that I want to share with you that I think that you're able to take away today, and you can apply them when you get back to the office. So if you think about just some of the standard elements of communication, we talked a little bit about the inconsistency of the communication. One of the projects that comes to mind for me is recently the Office of Systems Integration undertook a portfolio expansion project. There were 3 projects that were coming into the portfolio as of July of this year. We had the CalHERS projects via the Cover California. We had the EWIC project coming in from the Department of Public Health, and we had the Meds Modernization Planning effort that was coming in from Department of Healthcare Services. Now, for those of you that may be familiar with the Office of Systems Integration, and I know that John Boulay touched on it for a moment this morning, and also Mike Wilkening, which I'm very proud of, is that this is the Center of Excellence for Project Management within the Health and Human Services Agency. All departments within our agency are able to leverage the services that are provided by OSI. So it was natural that when these departments needed support for their large, major mega projects, that they would come to OSI. Now, in totality, those 3 projects alone were estimated at around $278 million. This is in addition to the portfolio that we're conducting oversight on that is $2.5 billion. So all of that to say that there is plenty of work to be done and lots of people working quickly to make things happen. There was a general framework. OSI was anticipating that projects would be coming into the portfolio. So there was a general framework that was designed, but it hadn't actually been executed yet, nor had we anticipated executing it on 3 projects in parallel. So it was a significant undertaking. It was challenging. So some of the key elements that you need to consider from a communication aspect: common language. You have to have a common language within your project team. This team consisted of many different subject matter experts. We had legal, acquisitions, HR, technology, project management, all very different disciplines, all different languages. You have to come to a common place where everyone is understanding what is being said. The second element is standard communication methods, vehicles. So you're ensuring that the way that you're communicating is consistent and that you're providing it in a consistent manner. So it's predictable. People are understanding what you're saying, the frequency in which it's coming, the format in which you're providing it in, that has to be consistent, predictable. The third element, and I see my project manager out here. Hi, Christine. My shiny star for transition. She came in and she knocked this thing out of the park. It was an incredibly successful project, and it was because of the focus that she paid to communication. So when we talk about the third element is your communication manager or liaison. That has to be your single point of truth. These sidebar conversations where somebody catches an executive in the hallway and says, oh, by the way, this thing is really going bad. The accurate, consistent communication from your single point of truth. I cannot tell you how important that element is. You have to establish that in the beginning of your project and keep it consistent. I know people are on the edge of their seats. It's a bunch of project managers. They all want to make sure that they're telling their people the right things. You have to have a consistent point of truth in your in your communication manager. The fourth element, and I think, Liana, you touched on this some, is the people side of change. When we talked about the projects coming into the portfolio, 3 in parallel, it was incredibly important that we were focusing on the people side of that change, the people that were coming into the portfolio that were on those projects. So CalHERS, EWIC, and MEDS. If you think about it, when we talked earlier about the lack of communication that's occurring and assumptions that happen as a result of that, these are elements that you have to make sure that you're taking into account so people feel comfortable and they're not making assumptions. So we set up forums where we did peer-to-peer outreach. We connected all of the subject matter experts both at OSI and on the project team so they knew exactly what to expect in the way that they were going to coordinate their work. We set up forums for all of the employees that were coming in to talk about what's changing, what's not changing, ensuring that they knew that the payroll was going to be handled appropriately, that benefits were going to transfer paper over. This is where you're going to sit. You're going to have your equipment. You'll have the tools that you need to be successful. All of those elements were incredibly important from a communication aspect with the people that were coming into the portfolio. They felt confident that they had a competent project team that was ensuring that all of their interests were being addressed. So in closing, 4 key elements. Consistent communication. You've got to break the silos of the different disciplines. You've got to come up with standard ways in which you're communicating. Who are you communicating to? How? What way are you communicating? What's the frequency? Your shining star. You have to have your communication liaison, and make sure that you don't lose sight of the people side of your project.
Lots to think about there, thanks. You know, to your point, the Project Management Institute, in its report, The Essential Role of Communication, indicated that organizations considered highly effective communicators had an 80% success rate on the original goals of projects versus those that were seen as minimally effective communicators who achieved only a 52% success rate. So communication does make a huge difference. Okay, we're coming into the final lap, and we have one more pit stop to take with all of you.
The chief mechanic doesn't just show up on race day hoping that everything comes together. They have a meticulous plan where everything in the pits has been rehearsed and practiced, and every risk has an owner. Should the risk event occur, they know exactly what to do.
Project governance accountability. It can be nebulous on most projects. It's an enormous influencer on how projects function and on the expectations that are held for project team members. In short, it sets the context for alignment of the project's objectives to the organization's business needs, and it provides a platform for policies, processes, values, and responsibilities related to the project. Effectively designed, it can be the key to effective risk mitigation. Russ, in your experience, how has effective governance helped you deal with the risks of projects that are part of every project?
So I think that governance structures really are the glue that hold this together. But before I dive into this, given the theme, how many of you wanted us to do this with a Southern accent? So, tried to get creative with it. But governance and accountability really are the glue. We've talked about communications. We've talked about sponsorship and collaboration. I can't say those words at this point in the day, apparently. But governance is the process. It's the social construct. It's the contract that brings all those things together. It sets the goal and really reinforces the why you're doing it in the first place. And now what do we expect of each other as we go through that process? What are the roles and responsibilities? Who's doing what to whom at what point? And how do we work together to get to that outcome? But for the second time in this presentation, I'm going to reference the dark side. How many people, when you hear governance and accountability, actually hear blame and bureaucracy? All right? So a governance structure just means I'm putting in so much bureaucracy that nobody can ever make a decision, we can never get anything done, and we just go around in circles. Or at the end of the process, accountability means somebody's going to get blamed. When things don't go right, we're going to blame another section, we're going to blame our systems integration vendor, we're going to blame somebody else. A governance process that's run well will keep you away from all of that. How do you set up an organization to work together towards a common goal and stay focused on that goal and be adaptable? You've heard that theme a couple of times today. How do I adjust course as we go through something? Very seldom is the original idea, the original plan on how to get there, the perfect plan. You have to be able to adjust. So I'm going to give you a couple of simple examples. One, for anybody that's run a marathon or plan to run a marathon, and I will tell just looking at me, or tell you that looking at me, I'm not one of those people. But the people that I know that have done that successfully essentially set up a governance structure with other folks that want to have the same outcome. They get together with a running group or with a running partner, and they set their goal for a year from now to run in a marathon. And they work out a process to do it. Everything from diet to training schedules and things along those lines. At 4 o'clock in the morning when the alarm goes off, if you're doing it by yourself, it's really easy to hit the snooze button and go back to sleep. But if you've got other people that you have to be accountable to, that you have to explain reason why you did or didn't do something, that's accountability, but it's not negative. You're working towards the same goal. They're coaching, they're mentoring, they're inspiring you to continue to work towards that goal. That's accountability, that's governance. Another simple example is a marriage. I'll use mine as the example. So 17 years ago, my wife and I entered into a contract, and if anybody repeats this to her, I will deny it.
Mum's word.
Elvis did it. No. We entered into a contract that brought our lives together. We do things differently now. When I was young and single, I did things differently. Everything from loading a dishwasher to washing clothes to how I deal with the bills. Now I have to worry about somebody else. We've got a contract between us to how to do things together to honor each other and get to better outcomes. And when we formed that contract 17 years ago, frankly, at that point, we never anticipated the conversation we had last night with my 15-year-old daughter about what she wanted to wear on Halloween night. That's adaptability. But that's a governance structure. How do we deal with each other? How are we working together on that common goal to educate our daughter so that she can get out of the house, be a self-sustaining, honorable person, and take care of herself in life? Halloween night is not the end of the world. May have felt like it for a few minutes. But keeping your eye on that end prize and adjusting as you go through it is the important thing. So maybe a work example might be a little more appropriate. So a long time ago, I worked for CAL FIRE. Back then it was CDF. And I was working on something called computer-aided dispatching. At that point, that was transformational. That was not something that we did. It's like smartphones today. We all have them. In the middle 90s, that was just a wild idea. At that point, we had something called magnet-aided dispatch.
The magnets on the refrigerator.
Basically, envision magnets on a refrigerator. We had a big whiteboard, magnetic whiteboard, and along the side of the whiteboard, we had fire stations, and each fire station had a magnet for the fire truck that was in it. And when a 911 call would come in, they would write the name of the incident on top, move a magnet under that heading, and they would position it. If it was upside down, it meant it was on scene and it couldn't be redispatched to something else. If it was right side up, it was available. If it was at a 45-degree angle, it was in transit and could be redispatched. It worked really, really well. But in 1994, we had firestorms up and down the state. And for anybody that lived here at that point, this probably resonates a little bit. We had huge fires in San Diego and huge fires in the North State. And literally what was happening is the system was overwhelmed. The people that were involved couldn't keep up. And we had scenarios where a fire truck from the South State would pass one from the North State on the freeway going in opposite directions, and we were not getting the right resource to the fire at the right time because we'd lost control. So our answer to that was, let's put in a computer-aided dispatch system. To do that, we set up a governance structure focused on the goal of not only accountability and being able to handle those big incidents, but to be able to track information and learn from that. How do we make the process better? So through this process, we had a lot of conversations with dispatchers, and I will tell you right now, they were right. They would say that I can do this faster in my head than you'll be able to do it on a computer, because to do it on the computer, you had to do data entry. They knew their local area. They knew the logging routes, the long driveways, the corners, the milestones, the capabilities of every resource, and they could do it in nothing flat when they came in one at a time. But when you have that calamity and you get 911 calls just going off constantly, they couldn't keep up. And that's where we get to the resources crossing paths. So the whole goal here was to get to a better outcome. But the process wasn't really the technology. That wasn't the hard part. The governance on this was to make sure we had the right people in the right room talking about org change management, talking about the collaboration, who had to participate, how do we communicate with each other, and how do we have the sponsor, the department director out there carrying the torch saying this is the goal and this is why it's important to us, to the citizens of California, and to everyone engaged. And they did that consistently. That's governance. That's keeping your eye on the ball. That's what the governance process is for, and that's the glue that makes it successful. And if you're missing that, you can excel in certain areas, but the odds are you're going to miss your overall target. So I really think governance and the accountability that goes with it, used the right way, is not a negative thing. It is that unifying fact. It's the glue that pulls all those things together that'll make you successful.
Thanks, Russ. Thanks for taking us in for the last lap. I appreciate that very much. So now it's your chance to take the wheel and to interact with the leaders on our podium today and ask them the questions that you may have. Pick their brains a bit and get from them what you can that might support your projects in the long run. So do we have any questions from any of you?
Hi, we are standing up an agile delivery practice over at DMV and just starting to look at governance. And I was wondering what the difference is for all of you who are in the traditional government structure of the waterfall versus agile.
So one of the things as we've looked at agile development is there's a lot of trends. I mean, a couple of years ago we were talking about big data, and these terms get thrown around and they're like magic, and we tend to overstate the capabilities. For us, as we focused on agile development, we focus on things where we don't necessarily know the road or the process and the specific requirements, but we have a problem to solve. How do I jump in, pull in people from all the disciplines, and develop that in a kind of an open forum where you can bounce ideas around and do it in short periods of time, which is kind of the agile thought process. If something has a very methodical process, a lot of times, frankly, waterfall still is the best tool. And I think part of the governance is not getting swept up in the momentum of the moment where everything's got to be agile. Is pick the right tool for the job, and that is part of the communication and part of the governance that has to go with it.
Any other comments on that? Okay, we have another question over here.
Thank you. This probably goes across to all four, and it has to do with sponsorship. So a lot of times when you start a new project, it's like a new shiny toy for your kids, right? And the sponsor's like, yes, I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to go. They're right there to help you for quite a while. And then about a year into the project, it's not so shiny and new anymore. And so how do we, from a project management perspective or project manager perspective, help to keep our business partners, our sponsors engaged to make sure that they are doing what they are supposed to be doing as well?
Good question. So what I find, in many cases, it's not even the same sponsor. If you've had a project for multiple years, you may end up with multiple sponsors. So kind of back to the agile versus waterfall, if you're going to be on a 10-year project, that's a long haul, not only for your staff, but for the sponsors to stay really motivated. So breaking it up so they are short sprints and that they are delivering value along the way, I think keeps the team and it keeps the sponsorship very fresh is what I find. At CalPERS, what we're doing is we're doing a semi-agile software development lifecycle where every 7 weeks we are delivering new functionality. So the business isn't waiting months or years. So they're very active and they're ready to jump right into the next phase. And I just feel like that helps us to at least start. We're not always talking about the same thing for so long. It changes up the conversation. And I think that's, at least for us, has worked really, really well.
I think for me, much like Liana, it's about success in a way, right? So when you've got a sponsor, you've got to make that commitment and that agreement with them, but also you've got to nourish that relationship, right? So along the path, you've got to be able to bring them some wins, right? So they're not waiting, the 3 or the 5 years, right? Incrementally, right? What can you do? What has the project done, right, to deliver something to build credibility not only for the project, but for the sponsor, and keep emphasizing, kind of the business outcome to them, because the project got off the ground, right, with the right foot, and you have the sponsor engaged. So keep them focused on the business outcome, keep them focused on the path, the journey to the business outcome, and what you've completed to that point.
I'm just going to add one more thing to it. I also get them out of the office. If you could actually have them come, the sponsors go out and meet with your team, or even if you have delivered in phases, if they go out and see how that's actually added value, because many of these are directors or secretaries, they're high level. If you get them out of their office and actually see how it's adding value, that connects them. It's not just them being a decision maker, they're actually delivering and making a difference. So I've actually worked on projects with quite a few of the folks that are up here on the stage, and that's really, really helped a lot.
Well, we've come to the end of our time with you, and I want to thank you for spending the last hour with us. I was hoping we could get to another question, but we do have another session moving in here. So please join me in thanking Russ and Gretchen and George and Liana for sharing their expertise with us today. And thank all of you again for joining Delegata in this session.